during and after we are done. Of course, I take you back to Victor.
Last week, the U.S. Ambassador, Meg Whitman, was in Kisumu and held a meeting with Governor Nyang' Nyong'o and security agencies there in Kisumu. And there was a travel advisory which was issued against people traveling to Kisumu and even U.S. citizens working in Kisumu. How do you think, and how did this message sink down with the residents there and even the government
themselves? The travel advisories that were actually issued back. The governor and of course leaders from this region have actually consistently lashed out at those travel advisories. However, they have maintained that there's need for actually to ensure that peace is maintained in this region. So that is very much in order. However, they say that this remains a very peaceful region, and it must be looked in terms of being a peaceful region and not looked in the precincts of course, what the travel advisories have actually been put out there by the U.S. government and other European nations.
Simon Ashola, thank you so much from Kisumu. Please just stand by just in case of anything and kindly let us know what will happen from the lakeside of Kisumu. All right. Ben Troy, before I hand it over to you, I think it's now time to exit the stage and give it to Regina, who will also sit on this seat to take this discussion to the next level. But for me, it's morning. Ben Troy, you can take it over.
Thank you so much, Victor. And I'll begin exactly where Victor and Achola were having a conversation in terms of the travel advisory. And gentlemen, I would like you to dig into this because it's not the first time that we are having these advisories, and the good thing is that as Kenyans, we've always maintained peace during, not always actually, talking about the last two election cycles, this and the last one, we were largely peaceful. And something that always comes up when you talk about Kenya and anything big from Kenya is that if Kenya sneezes, the whole region gets that cold. And I remember, Wakili, you talked about how US had even mentioned Kenya when you talk about the electoral process. What precedent or the jurisprudence that we have in the Kenya, in our country, what can you say in relations to the decisions that we make that not only affect us, affect the region, and maybe a good example or whatever example to the rest of the world?
Thank you, Pentry. That's a very good question because Kenya is a big brother, as a matter of speaking, in the region, and by region we mean Africa, and sometimes to the world, because what happens here is really of keen interest for the Western countries because, one, they have a lot of interests around here. The U.S. has the embassy, the U.S. embassy is it should be the largest in Africa. They have a lot of contingent around the logistical issues they deal around the region. It's coordinated from Nairobi. So if Nairobi is catching a cold, then the U.S.'s interests and the region will be affected, same to the Western world. That is one. Secondly, the other East African community, Kenya, has almost one of the largest, has the largest economy, which almost combines the rest of the economies, except now that we have brought DRC now, that is going to change. So the region depends on Kenya a lot, especially as a gateway for goods and services. I was reading the newspaper yesterday and I saw the business, if I'm not so wrong, the business daily saying now business will resume once the decision is given. I'm like, why did it stop in the first place? Because they were not voting. They were not voting. Somebody on a container, carrying a container to DRC or to Juba, why should he stop his business? So there's a sense in which even business in the other places is really affected when we are in election, especially the 2007-2008 election. Uganda was really affected. And any small thing, I've been in Uganda at some point when Kenya has issues, and it's actually affected more than Kenya. So that means that it's something which they have to hold with bated breath that, you know, let's hope it goes well so that we continue with our business. So that aspect is what it is that we are looking at. The U.S. is a Kenyan friend, and it's important that whatever affects them affects us. So when they see something affect them and they don't have the courage to walk through it the way we have, courtesy of our constitution. I think that is something commendable. Remember, their constitution is very old. Ours is a bit new. It's 2010. And we had some safeguards which actually ensure that we act robustly to some of the things which affect us as a people. And it was given birth to after a serious crisis, so we do not need to go back there. As Kenyans, we have to see it through. Because in a sense, if anything happens in Kenya, it affects these other people. So we need to work as the elder brother. You know, when your elder brother, whom you depend on, seriously is affected, so your head is not clear. So we need, as Kenyans, first, to do the right thing, then set up precedent. You see, after us annulling the election in 2017, Malawi, our good friends to the south, also had the courage to do the same thing. So, you know, that means we are setting precedent. There was a communication, a silent communication from the East African community, people saying, begging Kenyans that please do a fair and verifiable election because we are also looking at you so that we can also be able to task our people to do the same. Because there's a way, if we do it right, the other people will be behooved to also do it right. So that is I think, something we need to look at.
Yes, and I would also want to pick your mind, Wamboi Shadrach, as well on that, because at the end of the day, you are officers of the court as well. What precedent does that our decisions set? Because in 2017, the world was watching, and after that historic decision, Kenyans, even the countries that were not watching, were like, we need to watch how Kenya conducts itself. And as Gesori has talked about, is that even Malawi, and not only that, Kenya's example, the decision, the bold decision by the Apex Court, is being watched keenly, not only by our East African brothers, but by the rest of the world.
Well, Ben, I mean, to be very fair to ourselves, we have always proved to be a first amongst equals. And this, in a sense, should be, I mean, this is a conclusion you should arrive at when you reflect on the history of, you know, the governance of this country. Now, remember, if you look at our neighbors, we are probably one of the countries that basks in a lot of glory as far as the respect for the rule of law is concerned. If you visit just our neighbors here, the Ugandans, they have been a subject of so many coups. And in any event, if you're to look at even the current presidency of Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, he actually assumed this reins of power after a coup was conducted, and then subsequently there has been, you know, lip gloss service on their democracy. There has been some intimation that they actually participate in democratic elections. Well, we might, I mean, some people might have a different thought on that as a conclusion. And again, if you go back to our neighbors here in Tanzania, what the Chebukati says is, you know, the final declaration is not up for challenge in any court. In any event,
our brothers in Tanzania.
Our brothers in Tanzania, the Chebukati, once the Chebukati says something, it is a done deal. You cannot question that before any court of law. Yeah, it's cast in stone. So really, when you look at us, we have proved, you know, and this is after the independence. Since we got our independence through you know, blood and sweat, we have ensured that we respect our constitutional democracy. In any event, the little attempts that have been there to have a coup probably has been through, you know, the infidelity when it comes to the implementation of our laws, so that we have had regimes that have ascended to power, but through constitutional means, but you know, during by use of processes that are not as the ones that have been anticipated in our constitution. So when you want to look at Kenya, Kenya becomes unique when it is compared to her neighbors. Many countries in this continent have been a subject of so many coups. People who have refused to yield power, people who have always participated in violence and war. You know, go to Gabon, go to Congo, DRC, Congo. We have so many examples. I mean, Africa is just with replete of examples. So that when you want to look at Kenya, you want to look at Kenya from an American point of view. Because our constitution It's even one constitution that has been applauded. It has received so many accolades, even from our neighbors in America. It has received so many accolades from our friends in India and even in South Africa. So that when you cannot compare us with the likes of Uganda, you cannot compare us with the likes of Gabon, DRC. No. When you want to compare Kenya, you must compare Kenya with its equivalent, which is the United States of America, where there is some respect of the law and the constitution. And that is why probably this must explain the kind of attention we've been receiving. I've been receiving some interviews from media stations in South Africa. They are keen on establishing what is happening in Kenya. Mm-hmm. Remember, even the environment we've created for ourselves, because of our respect to the rule of law, it is what has attracted so many investors into this country. So many people actually flourish in their countries. They flourish in their businesses because of the peace and tranquility that we enjoy as a country or as a people. That is why we have so many South Africans investing in Kenya. We have so many, Chinese coming to invest in Kenya. We have so many people from Japan investing in Kenya. We have Americans who are investing in Kenya. And that is why they're even, scaring some of their people. You should not be in Kondele, you should not be in Kisumu, you should not be, because of, they know too well.
Because of their interest as well.
Yes, they know too well that they have invested so much in this country. Mm-hmm. And that is why what we do, our business is part of their businesses. Mm-hmm. And as you well put it, when we sneeze, they all get a cold. Mm-hmm. Yes. And
I'll throw this on the other side. I will be coming to you, Wakili, on the Kenyan foreign policy, bearing in mind that, or judging by what has transpired in the last couple of years, just shows how strong our foreign policy is. I'm saying this because looking at the organizations that we've been able to head, IGAD, AU, East Africa Community, and also the non-permanent seat at the UN Security Council, just underscores how strong our foreign policy is, and all eyes are on this judgment, bearing in mind that we even have judges, retired judges from other countries who are just seated there and watching, and of course they're going to write a report on how they have seen how the whole exercise has been. And as Kenyans, we also have another chance to cement ourselves in the annals of history in regards to how we conduct ourselves in this, not only in the judgment, but post-judgment. Maina.
Oh, yes. The significance of Kenya to the global community can never be enough because in the colonial times we were said to be the gateway of the continent and East African region. Indeed, if you look at the various unprecedented verdicts that we have made in the Supreme Court for the last 3 presidential elections, is actually a testament of what have actually been adopted by other democracies in Africa. And indeed, I've seen international media houses from advanced democracy complementing this particular electoral process in our country. I saw last night I was reading an article from the New York Times. I saw Washington Post also writing an article in regards to the whole process. And that underpins the interest that these people have seen in our electoral process. That actually shows that our democracy has really grown. I saw them actually comparing the insurrection of 2020 on the Capitol in the U.S. Capitol, where there was the conservatives trying to dispute the elections through the unorthodox means. And they were comparing the experience then with how Kenya is handling its electoral outcomes. That is in 2017 and also 2022. That is the kind of maturity that Kenya has come into. And I must say that our constitution has really helped us in actually getting this global respect and also the regional respect from our peers in the region. And that is the kind of direction we should take as a country. Even in terms of the economy, we need to take the direction that our democracy has taken, where we have diversity in terms of the products that come from our country, and also how we govern our commercial sector, so that that vibrancy can be realized and we can be able to have the strength that comes with the vibrancy of the economy. Where we are heading to, my brother Troy, is that there might be a unification of the East African region in some years to come. In fact, the drafting of the constitution of the East African Federation is underway. I think it was supposed to be out by 2023. So if as a country we get it right, how we govern ourselves and how we conduct our commercial sector, then it means even when we unify as a region, we are going to be having an upper hand in that unification in regards to offering leadership at the governance level and also at the economic level. And that's where we should head as a country. The Kenyan foreign policy is as vibrant. Remember, we have a concrete foreign policy that is documented. I think it is one of its kind in the African continent. And I think even as the next president comes, we can only improve on that foreign policy or make it even better, so that as a country we can have a country that is respected at the global level in terms of offering direction from the sectors of security, peace, and also the economic level. Because as of now, we are seen to be a regional superpower, but continentally and globally, we are still identified as a developing nation. How do we move from that status of a developing nation to a continental superpower and a global partner with the developing nation? It's by having a vibrant economy. And a vibrant economy comes with building an inclusive economy, irrespective of the strength of the enterprises that we might be holding as individual population in this country.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Maina Karobia, for your time and your insight. We have been here with you since we began this broadcast 7 minutes to 7, and of course that is quite impressive. Thank you so much for your insight. That has been Maina Karobia, who is a governance and leadership expert, and has been actually assisting us in putting things into perspective as we wait the big judgment. We are just an hour shy of that judgment, and the Apex Court did send earlier this morning, notice on that, and said that at exactly noon is when they will be giving us that judgment. And now we have new energy, new strength, and we are also trying to get that gender parity. And we are now joined by Regina Manyara. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Troy. Indeed, you have been holding forth all the way from the crack of dawn, and we're here to support you. Remember, all eyes are focused on the Apex Court as well. Put 1 hour to go. We'll know which direction the country is going to be taking in terms of matters of leadership and, governance, so to speak. And it's definitely going to have a ripple effect in as far as Kenya moves forward, matters of business as well as our international relations. And I like what our guest, the political analyst, this is Maina Karobia, said, that in the next few years, we are likely to see a unification of the East African community, as it were, and Kenya needs to cement its place as the center of it all in as far as matters of politics are concerned. Just to remind you that we welcome your feedback. You can get us on Twitter on KBC Channel 1. Now, as all eyes are focused on the Supreme Court and its decision that it's yet to be made in the next 1 hour, let's take you down to Dagoretti, where our reporter Beatrice Getonye is covering, the CBC classroom, so to speak, with Cabinet Secretary there, Professor George Magoha. Good morning, Gatonye. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Regina Manyara and Ben Troy in studio. I'm coming to you live from Dagoretti High School, where Professor George Magoha was here, the Education Cabinet Secretary. He was here to open 2 classrooms. As we all know, the CBC transition is happening next year, and grade 6 learners are expected to join junior secondary. And the CS has been busy running up and down, ensuring that The classrooms that had not been built are actually being built. And he says by Friday, the 20,000 classrooms will be ready, both in public and private schools, ready for learners come next year. He says the next government that will be coming in will find all systems go in terms of the CBC transition. And he says, as we know, in a few hours, the country is awaiting the Supreme Court verdict. CS Magoha says, however the outcome goes, or whatever the decision will be, he doesn't see it affecting the school calendar. And he further says that in case the political players decide to extend their time, there will be more consultation on how the education sector will continue operating. But he says he doesn't foresee any major challenges in terms of the students and pupils going on with their studies. He says the school calendar come next year, it gets back to normal. As we all know, due to COVID-19, the school calendar was a bit affected, and in 2023 is expected to normalize. And he says he doesn't see any major challenge in terms of the verdict that will be given today affecting those plans. Otherwise, the CS, as we all know, he's been running up and down, ensuring that the learners, especially the grade 6 who will be transitioning next year, will find all the classrooms ready. Here at Dagoretti High School, the students are going on with their studies. They are in class, and as you can see behind me, it's their break time. I think they're going for a cup of tea, and with the Supreme Court verdict being awaited, the schools are going on and the studies are going on. And earlier on, we were at a secondary school just here in Dagoretti, and the students are in class, calm and studying. So that's what I can say as of now from the CS Magoha, and even as the country awaits for the Supreme Court verdict. Back to you in studio, Regina.
Yes, thank you very much, Gatonye, for that update in regard to where we are when we talk about transiting into the CBC, that is a competency-based curriculum, their way of learning. What we know is that the tests that are going to be rolled down under CBC will entail a balance between formative and summative assessment. So in layman term, it means that students have technically already sat for the school-based assessment in grade 4 and 5 and are now sitting the last batch of tests ahead of the December national examinations. Now, the end of primary education national assessment will be administered by the Kenya National Examination Council at the end of grade 6 with a total weight of only 40%. So this is ongoing, and there's been a lot of talk in regard to what Cabinet Secretary of Education in charge of education there, that is Professor George Magoha, has been doing for the last few weeks, and especially a day when it seems that, operations are half and half as Kenyans expect that particular ruling to be made in an hour. So he's been crisscrossing the country, ensuring that at least the 1.25 million students that are expected to be taking the exams as of December this year get to do so in a new infrastructure. Well, we'll be speaking that as we continue just looking at what we expect ahead of the Apex Court ruling that is set for noon this afternoon. Now, O'Brien, take it away, just to give us a quick summation of what key issues the 7 judges are going to be looking at this afternoon, or rather have been looking at.
Well, thank you, Regina Manyara. Actually, in the morning, we looked at the 9 issues that were presented before the Apex Court that they are supposed to use to determine their judgment. And of course, we went through them, quite lengthy. Last week, we saw the presentation by various legal counsels representing Azimio Kwanza, Kenya Kwanza and Azimio La Umoja. And of course, now today, we expect now the Apex Court to give us a verdict on what they have agreed or what is the way forward. And of course, the countdown has started. And when I look at the clock. The 1 hour countdown is already underway. We are talking about 2 minutes have already elapsed and about 50 seconds. So the clock is still ticking, and the whole country is now waiting and watching what would definitely to hear from the Supreme Court in Milimani. Of course, as we were telling you, the security around the Milimani Law Court has been beefed up with restricted movements for both vehicles as well as human beings. And so that is a sign that you know, it's all systems go there. We have our reporters there who are on the ground, of course, you know, tracking the happenings, not only here in Nairobi, but we also have our team in Nyeri, in Uasin Gishu, in Kisumu. We have just seen our reporter there, Simon Achola, giving us an update. We have also seen our reporter in Uasin Gishu, as well as Kirinyaga and Nyeri. They are tracking the happenings there so that we can get to understand the reactions from the residents of these areas. And the reason why the 4 areas are critical. Remember, Kisumu is the stronghold is actually seen as a stronghold for Azimio la Umoja presidential candidate, that is Raila Odinga. While in Gishugu constituency, that is in Kirinyaga County, that is where the home of his running mate, Martha Karua. And in Nyeri, we have the Kenya Kwanza running mate, Mr. Gachagua, that is where he hails from. And in Uasin Gishu, the Sugoi, in Sugoi, that is where we have the Kenya Kwanza presidential candidate, William Ruto, the president-elect, you know, he hails from there. So those areas are very critical. And of course, our reporters are there so that they can give us an update on how the people will react to the Supreme Court verdict. But I want to take you through the 7-judge bench and try to help you understand who are they, and what is their background, so that you can clearly understand who they are. Even as they make that very much awaited decision. And so we start off with the president of the Supreme Court of Kenya, that is Chief Justice Martha Koome. She was born in 1960 in Kithiu village of Meru district. Back then we used to have districts, we never used to have counties. That was in the 1960. That was 3 years before we achieved or we attained our independence or self-rule from the British. And so in 1986, that is about, he graduated with a Bachelor's of Law from the University of Nairobi, and in 1987, he was admitted to the bar to be an advocate of the High Court after going through the Kenya School of Law, which is mandatory for any lawyer practicing in Kenya. And in 2010, she graduated with a Master's of Laws in Public International Law from the University of London. And why this day is very critical, remember, this is the day that Kenya promulgated its constitution, and she was a member, or she played a critical role in ensuring that this constitution was delivered in 2010. In 1988, she began her legal career as an associate of Madenge and Mushemi advocates here in Nairobi. And in 1993, she started her own law firm, that is Martha Koome and Company Advocates, and she became a managing partner in 2003. She was going to serve that position for another 10 years, and in, from 1993 to 2003. So in 1996, she served as a council member of the Law Society of Kenya. She's one of the people who is credited with bringing the vibrancy of the Law Society of Kenya, with, among others, Gitobu Imanyara and other people, you know, who are critical in shaping the legal fraternity in this country. And she partnered with many other people, including the senior counsel, Paul Moite, who we just saw the other day. And so she has quite a big profile there. And she has also served as a chairperson of the Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA, where she was important.
Before you continue giving us, the bios of the 7 judges there, just to point to some of the pictures of what is happening at the Supreme Court. We see various councils have already started, arriving at the Milimani. Those are just live pictures that are coming to you there. Well, as you can see, we are less than 1 hour away from the delivery of that judgment. We have tried to just do a preempt. What are we likely to see? And from our eminent panel that we have in our studio is that there are only two ways that this could go. It's either a nullification or the election is upheld. And we all know if it's... we are looking at the upholding of that particular election, then we have the 13th is the date, so to speak, for a swearing in. However, in the event of a nullification, we are likely to be looking at, in legal terms, either a rerun or a runoff, so to speak, one including the the petitioner and the main respondent there, that being President-elect William Ruto and Azimio flag bearer Raila Amolo Odinga, or well, the other might include the rest of the four candidates. But we are waiting to see. It's under an hour and we're here. Now back to you, O'Brien.
Oh, absolutely, and that's what we are doing here. We just, we are in studio, we are at the Milimani Law Courts just to observe what is happening there. And so we'll be crisscrossing over these critical places so that we can keep you updated on what's happening there. So we are still going through the profile of the President of the Supreme Court of Kenya, that is Chief Justice Martha Karambo Koome. And so in 2012, she was elected the chairperson of Kenya Magistrate and Judges Association. And fast forward in 2021, she was shortlisted for the Chief Justice position to replace David Maraga, whose tenure came to an end. And apparently, she managed to clinch the position, becoming her nomination was actually approved by the Parliament Committee on Legal Affairs, and she became the 15th Chief Justice and the first female to occupy that office in independent Kenya. So in 2021, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, as I told you, vetted her and recommended her. And so President Kenyatta appointed her as she took her oath of office at State House in Nairobi on May 21st, 2021. And, in the same year, that is May 24, 2021, she assumed office at a ceremony that was held at the Supreme Court building. So that is a brief of the Chief Justice Martha Karambo Koome, who is the President of the Supreme Court of Kenya. Let's now go to the other lady who is critical in today's decision, and we are talking about none other than the Deputy Chief Justice of Kenya. That is who? Very good. Philomena Mwilu. She was born in 1958, and her career spans for over 35 years. In 1984, she began practicing law in Muthoga, Gaturu and Company, and later transferred to Mutunga and Company Advocates. In 1991 to 1997, she was a senior legal manager at Jubilee Insurance Company, serving in that capacity from 1999 to 2000. She was a board secretary of the Electricity Regulatory Board of Kenya, which actually was succeeded by the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority. In 2006 to 2007, she was the deputy chairperson of the Energy Tribunal. And in 2007, she was a board director of Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company. In 2008, she was appointed High Court judge, first serving in the Commercial Court Division in Nairobi, and later moved to the High Court in Eldoret. In January of 2012, she was appointed the head of the Environment and Land Division of the High Court. In October 2016, she was shortlisted for the position of Deputy Chief Justice of Kenya after the holder of the position, Justice Kalpana Rawal, attained retirement age of 70 years. Justice Mwilu emerged tops in the interviews, and the Judicial Services Commission
petitioners. The scrutiny report prepared by the registrar of this court did not reveal any security breaches of the IEBC's RTS. IEBC successfully deployed a biometric voter register, system which captures unique features of a voter's facial image, fingerprints, and civil data to register and update voter details across the country and also in the diaspora. The BVR captures a voter's facial image, fingerprints, and civil data, which features are unique to each of the voter. In compliance with Section 6A of the Elections Act 2011, IEBC opened the register of voters for verification of biometric data by members of the public for a period of 30 days. Thereafter, the register was revised to address issues arising from the KPMG then audited the register, and we are satisfied that the inconsistencies and inaccuracies identified during the audit were somewhat successfully addressed. The second issue was whether there was interference with the hap-rounding and transmission of Forms 34A from the polling station to the IEBC public portal. The first petitioner arranged staging that a person who had access to the RTS intercepted, detained, or stored Forms 34A temporarily to convert or manipulate it before uploading it on IEBC's public portal. It is arranged also on 11th August 2022, IEBC dumped over 11,000 Forms 34A on the public portal between 11 to 11:09 hours. To rebut this allegation, IEBC and its chairperson, in their response dated 26th August 2022, denied staging and unauthorized intrusion of the RTS. In that regard, they urge that every image of Form 34A was uploaded immediately after the transmittal of results. The form was received as evidence by the timestamp. Similarly, the first respondent denied these allegations. Our finding: 1, presented to prove that anyone accessed the RTS to intercept, detain, or store Forms 34A temporarily before they were uploaded to the public portal. The allegation that 11,000 Forms 34A were affected by staging was similarly not proved. 2, the allegation that IEBC, its officials and strangers used a tool to tamper with the Forms 34A before converting them to the portable document format, that is PDF, that eventually appeared on the public portal, was sufficiently explained when IEBC demonstrated how KIMS captured and transmitted the image of Form 34A. Accordingly, we dismiss that allegation. 3, during the ICT scrutiny, it turned out that the transmission logs produced in the affidavit of Justice Nyangaya were of no probative value. The registrar's report shows that the original Forms 34A from the contestant polling stations, which were allegedly intercepted, were exactly the same as those on the public portal, and the certified copies that were presented to this court pursuant to the provisions of Section 12 of this Supreme Court Act 2011. 4, regarding the allegation that the integrity of the public portal was compromised. This was disproved by evidence of consistent attributes such as unique timestamps, uniform PDF conversions at the polling stations, correct polling station mapping, and consistent KIMS reporting from verification to transmission of results. 6, the RTS was configured on a virtual platform network, VPN, and the SIM cards locked to a specific polling station. The server was also configured to accept results only from authorized and properly mapped KIMS kits. In our view, the petitioners failed to produce credible evidence to the contrary. 7, a review of some of the logs presented as evidence of staging showed that they were either from logs arising from the 2017 presidential election or were outright forgeries. In our considered view, there was no evidence of a man-in-the-middle server configured to the IEBC's VPN network, and no evidence was produced to show that the chairperson of IEBC and staff were part of the arranged conspiracy to stage the transmission process. 9, whether there was a difference between Forms 34A uploaded on the IEBC public portal and the Forms 34A received at the National Tallying Center and Forms 34A issued to the agents at the polling stations. On this issue, the first petitioner's case was that there was deliberate manipulation and tampering with Forms 34A, as demonstrated in the affidavits, to the effect that votes were being deducted from the first petitioner and being added to the first respondent. To support this petition, evidence was contained in the affidavits of Honorable Martha Karua, sworn on 21st August 2022, Celestine Anyango Opio, Arnold Ochieng Oginga, and John Mark Githongo, which was sworn also on 21st August 2022, and a further affidavit sworn on 28th August 2022. Dr. Nyangasi also swore an affidavit on 21st August 2022, and so was Martin Papa, to support that allegation of handing and subtraction of votes. On the other hand, IEBC and its chairperson urged that all Forms 34A transmitted to IEBC portal were not interfered with or manipulated. Further, that the Forms 34A signed at the polling station and issued to the agents were identical to the Forms 34A uploaded on the public portal and delivered to the National Tallying Center at the Bomas. It was contended that in any event, IEBC used the original physical Forms 34A to tally, verify, and declare the presidential election results. This court ordered scrutiny of the forms from the 41 polling stations outlined in the affidavit of Celestine Opio to ascertain the allegation of interference. And this is our finding. 1, there were no significant differences captured between the Forms 34A uploaded on the public portal and the physical Forms 34A delivered to Bomas that would have affected the overall outcome of the presidential election. B, no credible evidence was presented to support the allegation that Forms 34A presented to agents differed from those uploaded to the public portal. The report by the registrar of this court confirmed the authenticity of the original forms in the sampled polling stations. The affidavits of Celestine Opio and Arnold Ochieng Oginga, while containing sensational information, were not credible, as the registrar's report confirmed that all the forms 34A attached to those affidavits and purportedly given to them by the agents at select polling stations were significantly different from the originals, certified copies, and those on the public portal. The purported evidence of Celestine Opio and Arnold Oginga, sworn in their respective affidavits, are not only inadmissible, but are also unacceptable. It has been established that none of the agents on whose behalf the forms were being presented swore any affidavit, that there is nothing to show that they had instructed both Celestine and Arnold to act for them, yet the two have gone ahead to depone on matters that are not within their knowledge. This court cannot countenance this type of conduct on the part of counsel who are officers of the court. Though it is elementary learning, it bears repeating that affidavits filed in court must deal only with facts which an opponent can prove of his own knowledge, and as a general rule, counsel are not permitted to swear affidavits on behalf of their clients in contentious matters like the one before us, because they run the risk of unknowingly swearing to falsehood and may also be liable to cross-examination to prove the matters deponed. We must remind counsel who appear before this court, or indeed before any other court or tribunal, of the provisions of sections 113 and 114 of the Penal Code that swearing to falsehoods is a criminal offense, and two, that it is an offense to present misleading or fabricated evidence in any judicial proceeding. Section 114 of the Penal Code states, and I quote, "Any person who swears falsely or makes a false affirmation or declaration before any person authorized to administer an oath or a declaration upon a matter of public concern, and at such circumstances that the false swearing or declaration, if committed in a judicial proceeding, would have amounted to perjury, is guilty of a misdemeanor." One of the most serious losses an advocate may ever suffer is the loss of trust by judges for a long time. Such conduct amounts to interference with the proper administration of justice. The contents of the affidavit of John Mark Githongo, which may contain forgeries, are also dismissed for not meeting the evidential threshold. Those averments contain no more than incredible and hearsay evidence. No admissible evidence was presented to prove the allegation that Forms 34A were fraudulently altered by a group situated in Karen under the direction of persons named in the affidavit, and video clip attached to it. As a matter of fact, these two affidavits amount to double hearsay and incapable of being proved at each of the rears. We turn to Form 34A for Gacharaigo Primary School, which was sensationally presented by Madam Judy Soweto, advocate, to show that one Jose Camango accessed the RTS and interfered with the result contained therein. This also turned out to be no more than hot air, and we were taken on a wild goose chase that yielded nothing of probative value. The Kim's kit relating to Songonyo Primary School, which bore the same serial number with another, was admitted by IMBC inadvertent manufacturer's error. We are also satisfied that the two kits and other identifying features that were markedly different, including the timestamps and polling code, and therefore nothing turns on this anomaly. Therefore, to the question whether there was a difference between Forms 34A uploaded on the IEBC public portal and those received at the National Tallying Center and those issued to the candidates' agents at the polling station, we have found none. Issue number 4, on whether the postponement of gubernatorial elections in Kakamega and Mombasa counties, parliamentary elections in Kitui, Rural, Kachiriba, Rongai and Pokot South constituencies, and electoral ones in Nyaki West, in North Imenti constituency, and Koanjenga in Embakasi South constituency, resulted in voter suppression to the detriment of the petitioners, and especially in petition number 5 of 2022. It is common knowledge that IEBC postponed elections for various seats during the general elections of 9th August 2022 due to mix-up of ballot papers in the above-named electoral units. It is the combined case of the first and second petitioners that, in terms of Articles 136, 2A, 177, 1, and 181, as read with Article 1 of the Constitution, the chairperson of IEBC had no jurisdiction to postpone elections in those areas. That Section 55B of the Elections Act is inconsistent with the Constitution and therefore void to the extent that it purports to donate to IEBC power to postpone elections in the constituency, county, or ward, contrary to the Constitution, and the postponement undermined the conduct of free, fair, credible elections by depriving the voters an opportunity to vote for all the candidates on the dates stipulated by the Constitution. The petitioners further contend that the postponement of elections and the overall effect of suppressing voter turnout in the electoral units in question, which was prejudicial to him. Both the first and third petitioners also believe that elections were deliberately postponed in Kakamega and Mombasa counties. It was arranged that these areas are considered to be first petitioner strongholds, and as such, the postponement of elections worked to his disadvantage and handed that benefit to the second respondent. These assertions were denied by IEBC and its chairperson. They, however, admitted that they experienced confusion with the printed ballot papers and explained that they only discovered the mix-up on the eve of the election when the ballot papers were being distributed to the polling stations. That as a practice, ballot papers can only be opened on the eve of the election day to avoid any mischief, and that by the time the mix-up was discovered, it was logistically impossible to print and replace the ballot papers in time for the elections. For this claim, it must be demonstrated first, IEBC had no authority in law to postpone the elections, and secondly, that the postponement was deliberate and calculated to suppress voter turnout so as to affect the result by reducing the petitioners' overall votes. We've looked at the provisions of Section 55B of the Elections Act, which provides for circumstances when elections can be postponed in a particular electoral unit, including in cases of emergency. We are therefore satisfied that on the basis of the foregoing provision, the third respondent and the requisite power to postpone election in the constituencies, counties, and wards in question Concerning the allegation of voter suppression, we note that voter suppression is generally recognized as a political strategy which takes many forms, but whose practical effect is ultimately to reduce voting by deliberately discouraging or preventing targeted groups of people from exercising their right to vote and thereby to influence the outcome of an election. It therefore goes against the letter and the spirit of Article 38, which guarantees every citizen the right to make political choices based on universal suffrage. As regards this allegation, it has not been shown that by postponing elections in the named electoral units, IEBC acted in bad faith or was influenced by irrelevant factors and considerations. From the explanation tendered, we are satisfied that the postponement was occasioned by a genuine mistake, which in our view could have been avoided had the members and staff of IEBC been more diligent when they went to inspect the templates in Athens, Greece, where the printing of ballot papers was undertaken. In the absence of any empirical data, we cannot find a basis upon which to conclude, as a matter of fact or evidence, that the postponement affected voter turnout, as a consequence of which the first petitioner alone, as a presidential candidate, suffered disadvantage. At any rate, the nature of the ballot being an individual decision and secret, there may be other factors to which the turnout in the named units can be attributed. From the evidence on record, however, it appears to us that 2022 general election recorded one of the lowest turnouts since the introduction of multi-party political system some 30 years ago. If there was a low voter turnout, it affected all the 6 categories of candidates, and its explanation, in our view, lies elsewhere, but certainly not a calculated suppression. On the other hand, in rebuttal to these claims, IEBC illustrated with examples to our satisfaction that there was no nexus between the postponement of elections and voter turnout in the affected units, far from the fact that this claim was undoubtedly just another red herring. It has nothing to do with the question under review, and accordingly we reject it and owned that there is no proof that the postponement resulted in voter suppression to the detriment of the first petitioner. Whether there were unexplainable discrepancies between the votes cast for presidential candidates and other elective positions. Issue number 5. The first petitioner was categorical that there was systemic ballot stuffing in certain counties, mainly in the Rift Valley and central parts of Kenya, where, according to him, a total of 33,208 votes were cast for president only, without corresponding votes for the other elective positions. On the part of IEBC and the chairperson, while acknowledging that indeed in some instances there was vote differential between those cast for president and for other positions, but maintained that they were insignificant, and those instances related to votes by prisoners and citizens in the diaspora who only vote for the president but did not take part in other elective positions. The differential also includes rejected ballot papers and stray votes which do not count as valid votes. The well-established principle that the person who asserts a fact must prove it casts the burden upon the first petitioner to demonstrate that there were instances of ballot stuffing of such a magnitude as to justify the nullification of the presidential election. Ballot stuffing, which is an illegal addition of extra ballots, is a type of electoral fraud aimed at swinging the results of an election towards a particular direction. Not a single document has been presented by the first petitioner to prove systemic ballot stuffing. A figure of that 3,208 votes relied on in this claim is based on unproven hypothesis that since the number of votes cast for the president is higher than those for other positions, then, without more, it must follow that there was fraud. We find that fraud is a serious criminal offense, and it must be proved beyond reasonable doubt under Section 5N of the Election Offences Act. It is indeed an offense for a person to vote more than once in any election. IEBC has provided a plausible explanation for the vote differential, citing categories of voters who only vote for the president, such as prisoners and Kenyans in the diaspora. There were an insignificant number of stray votes whose combined effect cannot justify nullification of the election. Finally, on this point, a general election in Kenya comprises of 6 different separate elections held concurrently on the same day. Such elections are held by secret ballot, and one cannot predetermine the voter turnout or how voters will vote in each election. None of the parties has flagged anything so significant that it would have affected the outcome of the presidential election vis-à-vis the other 5 elections held on the same day. We find, therefore, there were no unexplainable discrepancies between the votes cast for the presidential candidates and other elective positions. On issue number 6, whether IEBC carried out the verification, tallying, and declaration of results in accordance with Article 138, 3C, and 138.10 of the Constitution. This issue arises from the printings in all the petitions as consolidated. Based on the said printings, the affidavits sworn in support thereof, and the written and oral submissions by parties, two viewpoints regarding the meaning, scope, and application of Article 138, 3C, and 10 of the Constitution have been advanced. On the one hand, the petitioners submit that pursuant to the foregoing provisions, the role of verifying and tallying of votes as received from polling stations countrywide is vested in the Commission as a corporate entity and not the chairperson of the Commission. It is their argument that the chairperson cannot undertake this task to the exclusion of other commissioners. They submit that the language of Article 138.3c does not envisage a situation where the chairperson can arrogate to himself unfettered authority to verify and tally the results at the National Tallying Center without involving the other commissioners. Such action, they contend, would not only be unconstitutional, but would be sufficient ground without more to nullify an election of a president-elect. In support of their argument, the petitioners cite the Court of Appeal decision in IEBC versus Mainakiai and 5 others as affirmed by this court in the case of Raila 2017. The petitioners further submit that Regulation 87.3 of the Election General Regulations is unconstitutional to the extent that it purports to vest the power of verification and tallying in the chairperson of IEBC. On the other hand, the first, second, and third respondents submit that power to verify, tally, and declare results of a presidential election at the National Tallying Center is the exclusive preserve of the chairperson of IEBC. According to them, there is nothing unconstitutional about Regulation 87.3 of the Elections General Regulations. The said regulation the respondent submits makes no mention of commissioners other than the chairperson. At any rate, the respondents argue Article 138(3)(c) of the Constitution does not envisage a situation where it is the commissioners who personally undertake the task of verifying and tallying the results as entered.
Just on the idea that we lost on all 9 points, we find it incredible that that could be the holding of the court. In more than several of those cases, we had overwhelming evidence. As my senior counsel, Mr. Orengo, says, the servers were not opened. The involvement of the Venezuelans for a full month before, half a month before the elections and up to the 16th of August was not explained. No, it wasn't even offered. We perhaps are a little distressed on the over-reliance of a registrar's report that has no input from us. That report was completely silent on the failure to open the servers. The servers, repeat, the servers have all the answers. The exact role, we provided evidence that the Venezuelans were downloading documents, creating documents, and generating documents. None of that was touched. But as my colleague says, we hope they'll address all this in the final judgment. As somebody has said, it's incredible that we could lose on all points and they could win on all points. But as Senior has explained, it's probably the ideological aspect of this judgment.
Are you still confident on the first?
No. They have tied their hands. They can't get out of it. They have given their final decision. It's now a question of them finding the reasons for those findings and justifying them. It's not always easy, but I think they have some time to do it.
The other thing that I found a little bit disturbing is the presentation of the Form 34A by somebody I really respect as an advocate, Julie Soweto. It was described as hot hair, but you could see when that evidence was being adduced before the court, how engaged even the justices were. So I found it rather odd for them to describe it as hot hair. I think that's why I'm saying this is ideological, because they would have said on the evidence presented, we find there was more weight as to the evidence which was adduced by the other side. But to say that it was a hot air and it was a document coming from the Electoral Commission, I found it very, very disturbing.
If I may explain a little further on that point made by Julie Soweto in the petition, that gentleman, Camargo's name was not supposed to be on Form 34A. If at all he was involved in this election, he was involved on the technology side. So to find it anywhere near a Form 34A raised more questions than answers. There was silence. And of course, on the issue of the famous 34A that Julie was describing, it was found to have been signed by the agents of UDA and UDM on the 7th, which is before the elections. No mention was made of that. So many things, many questions, perhaps more questions than answers, but it is the decision of the court. They have to live with it just as we have. Is that all? Thank you.
Professor Agenda may want to say something. Okay. Sawa.
Well, that is the first press conference held by the petitioner's lawyer, Raila Odinga's lawyers. They are led by Senior Counsel James Orengo and Philip Murgor. And as I said, is that they are opposed to that judgment. Let's hear what the Nyeri governor has to say in regards to the same, but we will be crossing over there to know exactly their sentiments or sampling some of the sentiments of leaders. As you have seen, Uasin Gishu is packed, as you can see on your screen. There are also, as you can see, in Nyeri as well. Earlier on, we had a live feed from the president-elect residents in Karen, but the live picture that you can see on your screen is live from Uasin Gishu, where it is the home of the president-elect William Ruto. And indeed, as you can see, they have braved the rain to just listen up to the whole judgment by the 7 judges, and they are elated. As you can see, earlier on they were dancing to that, but as the lawyers representing the petitioner have talked about, is that despite the overwhelming evidence, they say that without any fear of contradiction, they do not agree with the decision and say that mistakes are to be corrected over time, challenged availing of election materials for comprehensive audit, but they say that they will look at the judgment keenly after the 21 days that the judges have talked about, so that they may give a more detailed report on the